emphasizes the same area of the brain. So, and I talk about compulsive people all the time. Most people won't admit that they're compulsive. They don't see it as compulsive. They see it as logical. That I have to clean my house before I can do anything else. That I have to, I don't know. I'm obviously not compulsive. If you've ever been to my office, you know that I'm not compulsive. Some people are hoarders. That's a compulsive behavior as well. I'm not a hoarder either. Compulsive control disorders are actions that may be pleasurable in the beginning, but as the attempt to resist the impulse continues, it becomes harmful to the individual or to others because they can't control the behavior. It's just like it is an addiction. It's an addiction of some other form. We only think of drug addiction, but the reality is you can be addicted to anything. Now this is a really serious problem as far as my my great nephew is concerned, because my great nephew was a heroin addict when he was born. His mother used heroin, and it took him 6 weeks to clean him up. But that connection, that loop has already been created in his brain. So now he's got a problem. He's going to be compulsive all of his life, obsessive compulsive. So he has to stay away from everything. He has to stay away from alcohol, tobacco, any kind of drug, potentially caffeine, but he can also become a compulsive gambler. He can become a compulsive shopper. He can become a sex addict. He can become, there's just a ton of different things that he can do, and he won't be able to control it. He's 12 years old, he sits down at the computer, starts playing a video game, and the next thing he knows, he missed school on Monday and Tuesday. That can be a problem with this kid. And of course, we've seen these gaming addictions as well. But he's going to have that problem. This disorder also has accompanying tension or arousal before the act is committed. And of course, he will have that problem as well. He'll feel, I need to play this game, I need to play this game. And then all of a sudden, he starts playing the game and he's lost 2 or 3 days. After culmination of the act, the individual often feels gratification, pleasure, relief, and then possibly remorse and guilt for not controlling the behavior, and hopefully they will control that behavior eventually. But they will feel guilt because they know that they have no control over it. Obsessive compulsive disorder is a repetitive activity where the goal is to reduce anxiety or distress caused by obsessive thoughts. The goal is rarely to provide pleasure or gratification and include compulsive hand washing. If you've ever been around somebody that has to wash their hands, if you watch Big Bang Theory, I hope you don't, I watch it compulsively. No. I'm in love with Penny, okay? Not Amy. No, I'm in love with Penny. Okay. What was I talking about? Okay. Sheldon is a compulsive hand washer. Checking things, ordering, counting, praying, and of course you could, we just had Easter, and if you're around any a Catholic church, then potentially you saw priests and nuns and whatnot. And sometimes it's almost like they are compulsively praying themselves. Compulsive behaviors are engaged in for the same reason people compulsively use addictive drugs. They get an instant rush, they forget their problems, they control their anxieties, they make their friends happy, they oblige their friends, and it's a form of self-medication. So despite the fact that they're doing something that doesn't have anything at all to do with drugs or medication, it's still a form of self-medication because this is how they control their behavior. It's just like they were taking a pill. These individuals are trying to alter their mood and change their state of consciousness. MRIs show that the same areas of the brain are activated when compulsive behavior is done as when drug use is anticipated. There you go. Okay, this is where I actually should have started. Drug users are compulsive about their drug use, of course. They develop a tolerance for their drugs. They have withdrawal symptoms about abstinence. They continue to use despite adverse consequences. They are in denial about their usage. Just ask somebody who smokes pot. They are in denial. They will tell you that they can stop anytime they want. Alcoholics will do the same thing. No, I don't have a problem. I can stop anytime I want to. They have a strong tendency to relapse, of course. Compulsive gamblers, on the other hand, we see exactly the same behavior. They gamble compulsively. They increase the bet amount when gambling compulsively, and this is a form of tolerance. They become restless when not gambling. It's you can see that as withdrawal. They continue gambling until they have used all their money. This is a form of abuse. They think that they can control their gambling and refuse to see the consequences. Hence, they are in denial. They don't have a problem. Of course, they don't have a problem. They're too smart to have a problem. But of course, they have a problem. And they will relapse whenever they have have money again. They will just go and gamble. Now, the interesting thing about compulsive gamblers is they don't gamble to win. They gamble to play. And they will gamble until all their money is gone. So if they make a big score, and this is how you can, and we see this on movies and on the television all the time, they will play until all their money is gone. Even if they make a big score, they don't back off and just pocket their winnings. They have to lose all their money, and they'll go back in until they lose all their money. So now we know what a compulsive gambler is. It's somebody who doesn't have any money because he gambles it all away. And sometimes it'll take him days to lose all of his money, but he's always broke when he comes out of the, he steps away from the table. One telling sign is that organizations like Gamblers Anonymous and Overeaters Anonymous use the same 12-step program that Alcoholics Anonymous uses. Exactly the same program. As bizarre as that is. I've had lots and lots of people that have called me on the 12-step program. Step 5 is apologizing to all the people that you hurt. Evidently, people hurt me a lot. It's kind of sad. My second wife called me. She was an alcoholic. She wasn't, well, she was. But I didn't know it. I didn't know she was an alcoholic when I married her, or I would never have married her. It's not that I didn't love her, it's just that I'm kind of a cold-hearted bastard, and I certainly would never have married somebody who was a drunk. Because I had 2 kids, I didn't want that. Anyway, she fooled me. It wasn't hard. I'm fairly easy to fool. Yeah. Love is blind, and I'm about the blindest guy you can possibly imagine. I certainly didn't want to know it. Anyway, she called me one day after I'd been married for 4 or 5 years. We were back in the States. She was back in the States, actually. She went overseas about the same time that we did. She called me and she apologized. She said that she should have helped her. She should have helped my kids more. She should have loved my kids more, is what she said. And she should have loved me more. That's okay. I'm pretty easygoing. Addictive behavior involves a lack of individual control, and these organizations demonstrate the necessity to change their lifestyles and beliefs. Compulsive behavior can be triggered by various factors: genetic predisposition, environmental stress, the repetitive behavior itself, like gambling. You put the quarter in. Actually, you don't do that anymore. I guess you just stick a card in. I hope it's not your credit card. Is it? It is your credit. No, okay, I don't know. You stick a card in. They give you buy a card for what, $50 or something? Is that the way it works? And then you stick it in the slot machine, and then you punch a button, and the slot machine just keeps working until you tell it to stop. You don't even pull the handle down anymore.
I think on some of them you can.
Oh, good.
And then you can put cash in there.
Oh, okay.
It takes cash.
So it's not just
And
the
then
card.
and then it's put onto a card.
Ah.
It's no longer like the one-armed bandit now.
One-armed bandit, yeah. So it's not a one-armed bandit anymore, it's a button bandit. Yeah, so you just have to punch the button. Punch, I don't know. All of these things. Compulsive behavior can be treated, okay, so we've already done that. Substance abusers, compulsive gamblers, compulsive overeaters, and compulsive shoppers all show the same dopamine increase in the brain, which is exciting if you think about it. So you don't need to take those drugs, you don't need to get snockered. You can just gamble and get exactly the same feeling. Or you can go out shopping and get exactly the same feeling. Some people are addicted to, wait a minute, what do they call them? Garage sales. They're always looking for some really big deal. I was watching Antiques Roadshow, and like half of the people had bought this fabulous thing that was worth $30,000 or $40,000 at a garage sale. So there are treasures out there to be found. So let's go every weekend. We need to do that in order to find our treasure. It's kind of like digging for gold. Those pirates, they bury their gold, and if you keep digging holes, eventually you'll find their pot of gold. Or leprechauns. We all know that leprechauns hide their gold. Compulsive behavior does seem to run in families. Binge overeating has been shown to have a relationship with overactive 5-HT serotonin receptors. Serotonin is the stuff that we try to increase to make you feel less depressed. So here we go. All you need to do is either binge eat or gamble or whatever, and it increases your serotonin level. This is fantastic. So when males get depressed, they do one thing. When females get depressed, they do something totally different. Males go out and punch something, or they exercise. They try to increase their testosterone. It makes them feel better. But females don't have that much testosterone, so it doesn't work for females. So the only way that females can feel better is by overeating, by binge eating, by eating something, especially fats. And the reason, the reason fats work is because fats have tryptophan in them, and tryptophan is a precursor for serotonin. So the more fats you eat, the better you feel, the higher your serotonin level. It's so exciting. Now the strange thing is this doesn't work for males, as weird as that sounds. So we could all go out and just binge on ice cream and make ourselves just feel giddy. Does that work? Well, no, it just works for females. It doesn't work for males. Sadly, I don't know why. It's not fair. Chocolate works as well, especially if somebody's just broken up with you. Chocolate has the same biochemicals in it that are increased when you fall in love. So if you eat chocolate, it'll make you feel like you're in love. So you can replace boys, if you're female, with chocolate. Which is good news if you think about it. But you have to be very careful, because on Valentine's Day, that guy that gave you the chocolate, guess what he's thinking he's doing? Yeah, he's trying to make you fall in love with it. So be careful. Twin studies support the strength of genetic factors leading to obesity. These connections were stronger than shared environmental pressures. Studies of adopted children supported the strength of genetic influences, where such environmental factors, factors as frequency and volume of meals, amount of snack food in the house, and the level of exercise was less significant than the heredity toward obesity. So no matter what your house looks like, no matter how much food you have, if you have a genetic proclivity toward obesity, you're still going to be fat. Sorry. That's just the way she works. It's the way it rolls. Now I've got some good and some bad news for you. I know, I just keep dropping bad news on you. Except for the fat thing, you can just eat that stuff, or chocolate. I bought a whole bag of Hershey's Kisses. I know, last time I was at the store. Which doesn't work for me. It works for females, but doesn't work for me. Researchers have found a marker gene that shows the strong proclivity for addictive behavior, especially alcoholism, DRD2A1. The allele DRD2A1, this is kind of exciting. We know that this thing's out there. If you are an individual with DRD2A1 gene, then you know that you have a proclivity for addiction. And you need to be careful. You need to be more careful. You also have a proclivity for strange behavior, like jumping out of airplanes and skateboarding and surfing and all that other crazy stuff. These individuals tend to be wanderers. They don't like to sit in one place all the time. They join the military and they wander around the world and they love it. They eat that stuff up. They're looking for new experiences. DRD2A1. Now you would think that I had that, but the reality is every place that we have lived, we've moved there to live there. I know, we buy houses. Yeah, so we homestead. Wherever we go, we homestead. That's 11 different homes. That's 17 actually, 17 different homesteads, which is a lot. We've lost tons and tons of money. Tens of thousands of dollars buying houses and then having to sell them at a loss. It's just not right. It's stupid, actually. But we are not, I don't have DRD2A1. My wife doesn't have DRD2A1. We don't just wander around. We go places to live places. When we moved here, my wife moved with me, and she would still be in the Hogan, except my daughter moved to Iowa, so she had to move back up to Iowa. That's one of the reasons why we're struggling right now, because she's up there and I'm down here, and it ain't a lot of fun. It certainly isn't a lot of fun, especially on Easter. You can imagine everybody else is partying down with their family. Did everybody have a good time on Easter? Anybody know? And their birthday, excuse me. Everybody have a good time? Anybody not have a good time with your family? Nobody wants to admit it. Good for you. Okay, cool. DRD2A1, you didn't have a good time?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
But I was gonna ask about the DRD2. Can you pinpoint to like that in someone who's like autistic?
Oh, we're going to do it right now.
Oh, okay.
Watch this. This is fun stuff. Okay, so they did studies and they looked at non-alcoholics, and what they found out was that 19 to 21% of non-alcoholics had DRD2A1. Only 19 to 21%, which seems high. But then they looked at alcoholics, severe alcoholics, and what they discovered was 69% of severe alcoholics had this gene, DRD2A1. They looked at compulsive overeaters. 45% had DRD2A1. 48% of smokers had the gene. 52% of cocaine addicts had the gene. 51% of pathological gamblers had the DRD2A1 gene. 76% of pathological gamblers who had drug problems had DRD2A1. 45% of people with Tourette syndrome, and here's the kicker, 49% of children with ADHD have DRD2A1. So there may be a lot of different reasons for ADHD. We already know there is lots of reasons, but there's a genetic proclivity for it. So it runs in families. Now here's the other odd thing. If I have DRD2A1, guess who I'm going to be attracted to? Somebody else with DRD2A1. So, if I'm depressed, guess who I'm going to be attracted to? Somebody else who's depressed. If I'm an alcoholic, my favorite people are all the people that live at the bar where I drink. And they are all alcoholics too. So this is really kind of interesting. So there is a genetic proclivity for ADHD. And there's not a whole lot we can do about that. Yes, there is. Sure, we can. We can treat the kid with Adderall or Ritalin or Strattera. That's the new one. Is Strattera. It is speculated that these individuals, the individuals with the DRD2A1 allele, have a deficiency of dopamine receptor sites, and therefore they must seek excessive stimulation to force extra dopamine to be released in the reward reinforcement pathway to feel normal. They don't feel normal. They're not depressed. They just need more stimulation than other people do. So hopefully they live in an environment where they can get that stimulation. Potentially, and we haven't even looked at this, but this is just a thought I had. We can look at baseball players and football players and basketball players and see how many of those individuals have DRD2A1. In other words, they're getting stimulation from their athletics. And we haven't even looked at that at all. But potentially that's the way it is. At the same time, since we have all these athletes that require all this stimulation in order to function normally, if we look at academics, the people that sit in their chairs and don't say anything and listen all day, we would assume that they would not have DRD2A1 because they don't need the same kind of stimulation. Either that or they have talked themselves into this being so stimulating that they're willing to sit there and listen to all that stuff. Isn't this fascinating? Since their normal is less stimulating, they get bored easily. Stimulation allows them to feel pleasure. And otherwise they don't feel pleasure. They sit there and they get bored easily. These may be the individuals that have to play video games. And in their video games, this is not just, the blue guy. Who's the Smurf? A Smurf jumping over flowers, that's not stimulating enough. They need to blow the heads off of zombies or whatever. So they need to play the Halo games or whatever. I think the Halo games, aren't you killing aliens in the Halo games? Does anybody know? Nobody plays games. None of us have the DRD2A1 gene. Okay, that's kind of exciting. Compulsive gambling may be triggered by the plethora of venues to gamble. State lotteries, of course. Oh my God, it's up to $54 million. There was one that was $500 million. I know, somebody in Florida won it. I'm so excited. Aren't you? They've done studies with people that win lotteries, and what they found is that they lose all their money within 10 years. And most of it they give away. Or sometimes they just speculate. They play they play the stock market or whatever. But state lotteries are one way to do it. You can spend all your money on state lotteries. There's poker machines all over the place, internet betting, legal off-track betting, casinos on every corner. Not so much in Arizona, but in other states, wherever you go, there's casinos, which is kind of exciting. Montana, every gas station is a casino. It has a back room where you can play slot machines in Montana. It's a really weird state. Why? Where did all this gambling come from? When I was born, there was no gambling anywhere. It wasn't even legal in Las Vegas. When I was born in 1949, you had to go to Cuba, in order to gamble. That was in 1949. 1959, Cuba fell to the communists, and they kicked out all the unsavory people in Cuba. Now you can't gamble in Cuba, which is not that exciting. So we needed to find gambling someplace. And they legalized gambling in Las Vegas, the only place in the United States where you could gamble. Now there's gambling in almost every state. As it turns out, there's gambling in every state except 2. We'll talk about what those 2 states are. Utah, how did you know Utah was one of them?
There's another one.
Where else are there Mormons? Wait a minute, let me think. No, not enough Mormons.
Hawaii?
Yeah, Hawaii's the other state. I know, as weird as that is. Who would have thought of Hawaii as a Mormon state? But it is. It gets weird, it gets so strange. You go to Hawaii, and the Hawaiians used to not wear any clothes because it's warm there. It's warm all the time. You don't need clothes. So people run around their bathing suits and whatnot. But if you go to the Mormon, anything that's Mormon, they got all the clothes in the world on. They look like nuns. It's really kind of fascinating. Compulsive overeating may be triggered by the plethora of fast food restaurants, lack of daily physical activity, fats and sugars in the foods that reduce craving, parents overfeeding their children, chaotic childhoods that lead people to use food to relieve their depression. One of the things we're going to discover in just a second is, where does all of this compulsive behavior come from? And the answer is, it comes from your childhood, as interesting as that is. So if you come from a chaotic childhood, how do you control the chaos? How do you change the chaos? You change the chaos by creating something where you have control all the time. And how do you do that? Well, with obsessive compulsive disorder of one form or another, you start gambling, you start drinking, you start using drugs. Then you have control. If you grew up in a chaotic home life, you have no control. So for the rest of your life, you're going to take control by becoming obsessive about something. Gambling, overeating, pornography, whatever. I think it's raining. I wrote my eyebrow. Oh, compulsive sexual activity may be triggered by a plethora of sexual situations depicted on television. I don't even notice it anymore because I don't have any kids, so I can watch anything I want on television. Latchkey kids with no supervision, children with no close emotional family connections may turn to pornography, and abundance of internet pornography, of course, is the other problem, and anybody can get to it anytime they want. Compulsive internet use may be triggered by expanding networks of games, massive multiplayer online role-playing games, which I don't understand. But I was working with a lady in Washington, D.C., and she was living with her sister, and her sister was married to this guy, and they had 3 computers set up. And they would play these strange this was back in 1999 too. They would play these strange role-playing games, multiplayer role-playing games. It was just the oddest thing in the world. As far as I was concerned, it was odd. Because that's all they did. They played these games. And then I found out they had kids. So when did they play? Well, they played all the time, but they didn't take care of their kids. So what did they do with their kids? Well, their kids watched television. How much fun is that? So mom and dad played video games while the kids watched television. Guess what those kids do today? They play video games. Because that's the way they grew up. They grew up watching their parents play video games. As stupid as that sounds.
So it's like a condition, like they were conditioned?
I'm sorry?
Is it a conditioned behavior or?
Yeah, well, they've conditioned their children. This is normal behavior as far as they're concerned. So of course the children are going to play video games because it's normal behavior. Anything the child sees as normal, the child will not compulsively do, but they will do as if it were conditioned behavior. And in essence it is. It's the same way with alcoholics. If you grow up in a family with alcoholics, you see that as normal. And that type of behavior. A lot of times alcoholics will create a chaotic home life so that they can drink whenever they want. The chaos create, oh, I'm going out to get a drink, that kind of, oh, the kids are too loud, I'm going to go out and get drunk. They create this chaotic home life, and then this seems to be normal behavior. So when the child grows up, they look for somebody who lives in that same chaotic environment. Somebody who creates a chaotic environment. So the children of alcoholics very often marry other alcoholics. They marry alcoholics because that's normal to them. It's normal home life. So it's just this cyclical situation that spins out of control. As sad as that is. But of course, practically it can be any behavior. It doesn't have to be alcoholic behavior or drug behavior. I mean, any behavior. If you grew up in a home where there's no noise, then that's what you're looking for. You're looking for an environment where nobody's making any noise. So if you grew up in an academic environment, you'd be looking for the same thing, as confusing as that is. If you grow up in a home where everybody watches television all the time, that's the main focus, and that's what you're looking for when you get married. You're looking for somebody else who will watch television. You're not looking for somebody who goes out every night, because that's not normal for you. Normal is staying home and watching television. Just something for you to think of if you're watching for. Or to look at your own lives and look at your what it was like when you were growing up. Have you been able to capture this same environment with your current situation? Now, you may get into a situation that's not the same as your home life, and you may not like it, and so you may get a divorce because you can't handle all the noise or the quiet or the fact that nobody ever wants to go out, that kind of thing. As confusing as that is, it's not confusing at all. We keep repeating, we repeat that's one of the reasons why we marry our parents. It's one of the reasons why men marry their mothers and women marry their fathers, because they're looking for the same type of environment. That's normal to them. Expanding networks of online gambling, expanding networks of chat rooms. This is why compulsive internet usage takes place. Some people have to be on, and this is new. This is all new stuff because the internet's only been around since 1993. So what's happening with the internet is confusing all the psychologists who went to school in the 1970s. In the 1970s, there were no computers. So they don't understand what's going on. It's not in their textbooks. They didn't learn this crap. I'm sorry. They didn't learn this stuff. I'm sorry. It slipped out. It was a mistake. So you guys are going to have to deal with this, and things are changing. Things are changing markedly. I keep telling you this. What the stuff that I saw when I was growing up has nothing to do with the stuff that you're seeing. And things are going to be changing exponentially. In other words, it's going to accelerate. The changes are going to accelerate. And the stuff that we have dealt with, the stuff that we need to deal with, the stuff in DSM-5 is decades old. You're going to have to find the new stuff. You're the ones that are going to have to identify this. And the other problem is, this is an Indian reservation. And they don't look at people. We're talking about an organization that lives in Washington, D.C. The APA, the American Psychiatric Association. They're the ones that write the DSM-5. They have no clue that you guys even exist. They think you're all the same. That if they talk to a Sioux up in North Dakota, it's the same thing as talking to a Hopi out over by Tuba City or whatever. I don't know. Mankopi, is that where they live? Anyway, see you guys later. So you're going to have to deal with this. And they don't know about you guys. And they don't care about you guys because there's not enough of you for them to change anything. So you're going to have to be the ones to identify the problems here. The problems here may be different than other places. We've already identified one problem. Hoarding is very prevalent here. It's not as prevalent off the reservation as it is on the reservation, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've got a neighbor with 2 cars in his front yard. Neither of them run. He's got 2 trucks that he drives. What the hell is that all about? He's got 2 storage sheds, and they're both packed full of crap. He's got crushed aluminum cans in his storage shed. And of course, the mice got into it, and now it's, or rats or the dogs or somebody got into it. Now it's all over his yard. But he's got 2 Chevys parked right in front of his house. For parts, I guess, one for parts for the other. The paint's all chipped off because, you know, it's hot here. I don't know if you noticed that. In the summertime, and it cooks all your paint off of your car. So both of his cars have chunks of paint that have come off. And I asked him the other day, he said, oh, I'm gonna sell those. He said, Travis's wife is making me sell them. It's Travis's fault. I can't wait. They've been sitting there ever since I got here. I've been here for 3 years, and they've been sitting in his front yard for 3 years. And I think he drove one of them once, but other than that. Anyway,
So
okay.
that's an impulsive behavior.
I'm sorry?
That's an impulsive behavior.
Yeah, hoarding. Yeah, hoarding. Sure, well, you know, when you're growing up, sometimes you don't have something that you need, so you have to go over to your neighbor's house to borrow a part from the car. So what we do, I mean, what people do, they buy old cars so they can steal parts off of it. Isn't that the way it works? Sure. In Montana, what they do is they'll buy themselves a huge garage, they'll put a car in the garage, and then they'll bury it with car parts and stuff, but they buy it at garage sales. All this stuff, you know, or somebody gives them something. Oh, I got an engine from Charlie, you know. Charlie didn't think it was worth anything, and I've already gotten 2 pieces off of it, you know, like he saved any money. Drives me nuts. So their front yards look like garbage dumps, right?
Could hoarding be part of that D2 or DRD
2A1, yeah, it could be. I know.
It's like
I-
addictive behavior.
Sure.
'Cause you're
I've
just
got more
buying-
junk than you. Yeah.
Like you already have like a cup,
Sure.
and then you go to town, and then you go and buy another one.
Sure.
What is it? ADR.
DRD 2A1.
Okay.
DRD 2A1.
So it's both maybe biologically and environmentally.
Yeah. The environment is what dictates what it's going to be. DRD 2A1 just tells you you're going to be addictive, obsessive over something, or you know, needing stimulation, and this is your stimulation. So anytime you're feeling unstimulated, you go out and into your garage and start and look at all your stuff and start figuring through your stuff because you've got all this stuff. It's so much fun. I'm kidding. It's not fun at all. Well, it's fun for them. And sometimes they will compare their pile of crap to somebody else's pile of crap. And that stimulates them. My garage is bigger than yours, and mine's fuller than yours is. I've got stuff up in the rafters that I've never even seen before. Some people will buy houses and they will buy garages hoping there's something in that garage. I know. They hope there's something out there so that they have more. And it's like winning the lottery. You never know. Could be something worth money. I had a friend up in Montana. He had a 58 Mercedes-Benz, and it was buried under all of his stuff. And he said, when I get older, I'm going to fix that thing up. And it's going to be worth a lot of money. So he had been accumulating parts for his 58 Mercedes-Benz. And of course you can't find parts for a 58 Mercedes-Benz in Montana. Come on. Nobody even has Mercedes-Benz up in Montana. But he would get them off the internet. He's a real fun guy. And that's what he did for entertainment. He would order parts for his 58 Mercedes-Benz. But that by this time was eaten up by mice. I mean, it's really crazy. Compulsive shopping may be triggered by the ease of getting credit, Materialistic view of life. It isn't who you are, but what you have. Barrage of advertisements on television, catalogs that you get in the mail. Be careful, if you buy one thing from a company, they will inundate you with catalogs for the rest of your life. My poor wife decided she was going to buy gardening stuff. Now she gets gardening catalogs from, everybody and their cousin. And half of them she just throws away without even looking at. But the reality is she gets 10 or 15 from all these different companies trying to sell her, plants and seeds and stuff. 24-hour home shopping networks, internet shopping, internet auction sites, all kinds of stuff on the internet, fun stuff on the internet. It has been observed that there is a history of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse in the lives of many of the individuals who suffer from compulsive behavior. This is one of the things that you need to recognize. So if you're dealing with somebody with compulsive behavior, you may have to go all the way back to their childhood and talk about their childhood. Now, one of the things that you need to remember about people's childhood is that they saw things through the eyes of a child. So their brain reconstructed or rationalized things as a child would do that, as the child would rationalize it. So potentially you can go back to their past, you can talk about this now that they're an adult, and you can change the way that they see what happened to them in the past. Is this exciting?
You can change.
You can change the way they see things. In the past, they may have, let's say they were sexually molested as a 5-year-old. As a 5-year-old, how does a 5-year-old see being sexually molested? How do they see it? Well, they may see it in an immature manner. And now that they are in their 30s, if you go back and talk about what happened to them when they were 5, they will be able to deal with that from a mature point of view. They've allowed something that happened to them when they were 5 to taint the whole rest of their lives. And we can change that by going back and talking about it. They will, in the beginning, they'll try to talk about it as if they were 5 years old. But of course, they can't maintain that mindset for very long because they're 30 years old. So if you talk about it with them, eventually they're going to get to the point where they actually deal with that problem. Whew. How about that? That's for you psychoanalysis. And that works. Now the sad thing is that some of the other forms of therapy that we use don't go back. You don't talk about somebody's past. You talk about how they're coping with it today. But the reality is that you need to go back and you need to talk about that problem in order for it to go away. Hey, Johnny.
Hey, Bruce.
What'd you bring him?
This is your class.
You know I don't like Johnny. No, I'm just kidding. Johnny's my pal. Engaging in the behavior can lead to compulsive behavior. A big payday when you're gambling. Eater takes in excess sugars and fats and changes their body chemistry, and now they need those sugars and fats in order to feel normal. Being able to buy something the individual wants makes them shop with the anticipation that they will find another coveted item. They'll find another treasure. Oh boy, there's treasures all over the place. I saw it on Antiques Roadshow last night. This guy bought a thing for $600, and now it's worth $150,000. I know, what a profit. And you find those things all the time. No, you don't. Usually you buy something for $600, it turns out that it's worth $60. That's usually the way it works. Participation in ritualized masturbation, compulsive viewing of pornography, or participation in other compulsive sexual behaviors will make the individual avoid normal sexual behavior or emotional relationships. You see this on television maybe more than we need to see. The individual that lives in his grandmother's basement, he's 35 years old. So what does he do down there? I'm not going to tell you what he does, but it ain't. He's not looking for a girlfriend. I guess that's the bottom line. He doesn't need a girlfriend. He's already got a girlfriend on the internet, and in his imagination, he's got a girlfriend. Okay, so this is compulsive behavior, and he will stop seeking any sexual gratification other than himself for the rest of his life, and that's the way he'll live. This is the 600-pound guy that Trump was talking about, who hacked the DNC. Well, if you didn't watch the debates, you don't know what I'm talking about. Turned out to be 5 Russians is what it turned out to be, who hacked the DNC. We already know that. Compulsive gambling has skyrocketed in the last decade with poker tournaments being shown on television and online gambling available. Does anybody watch poker on television? Could anything be more boring? I mean, really, it's poker. It's cards. You either get the cards you want or you don't. I know. Had a friend up in Montana who was a compulsive gambler, and he wanted to come down here and play poker in Las Vegas. He lives in Tuba City right now, so he can go back and forth. It's not that far. Married a Navajo lady, and he lives in Tuba City, and he's the worst gambler in the world. He doesn't have a poker face. I don't understand.
Mr. Officer.
What? Oh, I'm not talking about anybody you guys know. I've never mentioned this guy's name before. But I was adopted into his family, which is kind of interesting. So I worry about him from time to time, but there's nothing I can do. He thinks he's a good gambler, but he's horrible. He's the worst. If he gets a good hand, his face just explodes. I mean, he turns all red. It's funny. His hair, his hair. He pulls his hair back in a ponytail, and his hair starts to stick out if he gets a good hand. I mean, it's the weirdest thing you've ever seen. He's just funny. And he lives in Tuba City. So if you want to make money, go to Tuba City and play poker with this guy. His first name's Mike, so if you find a Mike in Tuba City to play poker with, go ahead and do it. Last year, gambling revenues in the United States topped $75 billion. Last year, gambling revenues around the world topped $125 billion. Does anybody ever play poker with Mike? No? Okay, good. All right.
That's long hair, huh?
His hair, it's weird, because he starts sweating, so his hair will come out. Let's start. I know. By the end of the night, he's got an afro. I mean, it's really kind of funny. Well, not that funny. Gamblers Anonymous defines gambling as any betting or wagering for self or others, whether for money or not, no matter how slight or insignificant, whether the outcome is uncertain or depends upon the chance or skill, constitutes gambling. So just about anything can be gambling. If I bet you that I can run faster than you can, or if I bet you that I can do 50 push-ups or whatever, that's gambling. It is gambling, especially if I take the money. Forms of gambling: casino-style gambling, poker, blackjack, craps, roulette, slot machines, video poker machines, horse and dog racing, jai-alai. If you know what jai-alai is, they use a big wicker basket, and they play with a hard rubber ball, and they throw it against a cement wall, and they have to catch it at a certain point, and then they have to throw it back. And they try to. Anyway, it's an interesting game. It's a game from Portugal. It's a Portuguese game. They played a lot down in Brazil. It's real popular in Brazil. Bingo and raffles. State-run lotteries and keno, sports betting, both legal and illegal, Super Bowl, office pools, and betting on golf, schoolyard games like lag pennies and flip coins. I don't know if you've ever flipped for quarters. You have to flip it near the the guy that gets closest to the edge of the building wins. Marbles? I don't know about people gambling marbles. Bar games like liar's dice, stock speculation such as day trading, commodities, and options. And then, of course, there's always internet gambling for those of us who know how to have a good time. Gambling has been around since the dawn of man. Gambling bones have been found in human habitation sites that date back 40,000 years. So it's been around forever. This was not an old world phenomenon. If we look at Mayan digs, they have dice in Mayan digs. I was just reading an article in Archaeology Today about a Mayan dig where they found all these dice, and they thought they were dominoes. They were like dominoes. I haven't figured the game out yet. But there's a number of these little bone things, and they gambled with them. They also gambled with a game that was very similar to badminton. In the Moche culture, if you know anything about the Moche culture, it's down along the coast of Peru. They controlled the Andes. They controlled the Andes at that time. They were defeated by the Inca, who took over. But the Moche, they have really interesting pots. If you look up, don't do it. It's pornographic. You don't want to see it. I know. These guys that lived like in 12,000 AD, they had all these. They had this really strange religion that was based on sex. It was based on sex. So, if you look at some of their pottery, it's fairly pornographic. Yeah.
You showed us.
Did I show you before? Oh my God, I showed you.
Cultural psychology or something.
Okay, yeah, well, it's there. They're funny. People having sex with dead people, it's really weird. It was a weird culture. Anyway, they have this badminton game, and they just discovered it off of another pot, another Moche pot, this badminton game, where they would flip it was like a shuttlecock, a birdie from badminton. It was feathers attached to something, and they would flip it with a spear, and then they'd have to catch it with, the other guy'd have to catch it with a spear. Really kind of weird. And I know this is brand new. We hadn't ever seen this before. Along with gambling has come attempts at prohibition. In India in 1000 BC, they prohibited gambling. During the Roman Empire, it was only for the aristocracy. During the Roman Empire days, Louis IX of France in 1255 banned gambling. Henry VIII, interestingly enough, banned gambling in England, and during the Victorian era in the United States. Now this gets really kind of interesting. Remember, I told you when I was born in 1949, there was no gambling in the United States. If you played poker and played for dimes or nickels or whatever, you could be arrested and thrown in jail. When I was born in 1949. Now, why in the world would that happen in 1949? We had World War II, we had World War I. Why in the world would we ban people from gambling? And the answer is because of this Victorian idea that people shouldn't gamble. It was a religious idea. Methodists don't gamble. Baptists don't gamble. So if you're around any of these people, any of these different religions, they didn't allow you to gamble. The only people that were allowed to gamble were Catholics, and they had bingo every Thursday night. I know, it's weird. Why Thursday? Because it wasn't Wednesday. Wednesday was Bible study. Okay. Do you understand now? Gambling came to the United States with the British. But the corruption and the addictive behavior made the practice unpalatable, and it was banned. Now remember, one of the reasons that so many Europeans came to the New World was because they didn't have religious freedom in the Old World. They were either Catholics or they were the Church of England, which is almost the same thing as being Catholic. So they weren't given religious freedom. They couldn't be whatever brand of Protestant they wanted to be. So when they came to the United States, the Puritans, the Quakers, the Anabaptists, the Amish, and the Moravians, and all the rest of those guys, they decided that that this was not a good idea because it caused addictive behavior. Now, one of the interesting things, this is modern religion, one of the interesting things about modern religion is that the Mormon Church does not support addictive behavior. So if you're Mormon, you're not supposed to drink alcohol, you're not supposed to use tobacco, you're not supposed to drink caffeine, you can't drink coffee, you're not supposed to drink Mountain Dew, you're not supposed to drink any soda unless it's, I guess you can drink Sprite, but you're not supposed to drink anything else. You also aren't supposed to gamble if you're Mormon. Now, states where Mormons are dominant, like in Utah and Hawaii, there is no gambling in Utah and Hawaii. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. So we can see how strong ideas that religions have control our behavior. While it was banned in the East, as people moved across the Mississippi River, gambling was popular in the Wild West. And of course, this is the Wild West. Your state was not made a state until 1912. You weren't admitted to the Union until 1912, along with New Mexico, of course. Infected by the same corruption and Victorian morality, by 1910 it again was gone here in the Wild West. There was no more gambling. Gambling didn't return until the 1970s. So gambling went out of favor in 1910, and for 60 years there was no gambling in the United States. You had to go to Cuba. And then in 1959, Castro took over Cuba, and he kicked out all the gamblers. So all of a sudden, we had no place to go. If you wanted to gamble, you didn't have any place to go. Then in 1970, everything changed. And the reason everything changed was because Florida decided that they wanted to, the Seminoles wanted to open a bingo parlor. And the Seminoles, and they petitioned the state. Actually, they petitioned the federal government. And when they petitioned the federal government said, geez, we don't want to mess with this. We'll have to mess with every tribe in the United States. And there's what, 500 and, how many tribes are there? 567? Back then there was only like 520. Federally recognized tribes. They didn't want to screw with it. Oh, did I say screw? I meant something else. They didn't want to mess with it. So they decided to allow the state to decide whether they gave it to the states. And so they allowed Florida to decide whether the Seminoles could have their bingo parlor. And Florida decided that they could. And after that, all of a sudden, Indian casinos opened up all over the place because they had already decided that the states could make this decision. I don't know what time it is. Okay, so it returned, but they couldn't just ban everybody from gambling. So what they allowed to happen was they allowed Atlantic City and Las Vegas to open casinos. And of course, this was big bucks because the United States hadn't had any gambling since for 60 years. And Cuba had closed down gambling in 1959. So all of a sudden, the gamblers had no place to go. So they decided to open up casinos in Las Vegas and Atlantic City. And this is one of the reasons that Donald Trump is Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump opened up casinos in Atlantic City. He also tried to sue to open casinos in other states. He wanted to open one in Chicago. He wanted to open one in Memphis. He wanted to open a gambling casino in Phoenix. And Arizona said no. Arizona said no. Illinois said no. Tennessee said no. And the reason they said no was because they had only allowed American Indians, whatever tribes were in the area, to open up casinos. So guess who Donald Trump sued? He didn't want to sue the states. You can't win that fight. So he sued the American Indians. He sued the tribes. He figured he could win that war. And he didn't. So if he tries to do anything horrible to you guys, if he tries to close down the reservations, if he tries to close down your casinos, now you know why. He doesn't like you. I apologize. Doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm not related to him. The only similarities between the two of us is we both have bad hair and we're white. He's taller than I am. He hates you guys, and I apologize for that. 48 states do have some form of gambling. The only two, of course, are the Mormon states, Utah and Hawaii. Compulsive gambling, like any other addiction, comes in two forms. And you know, Marius and I were talking about this yesterday. I was sitting in on his class. I was evaluating his teaching. We were talking about this yesterday. The reality is you really need to understand the history of all this stuff in order to understand what's going on. I mean, the next time Trump comes up for election, 2020, you need to remember this stuff. He doesn't like you. And the reason he doesn't like you is because he lost that lawsuit. And it cost him tens of thousands of dollars. And of course he goes to lose money. And he blames you guys for it. So if he tries to close your reservations down, and he won't start with the Navajo Reservation, it's the largest reservation in the United States. He'll start with the little bitty ones like Turtle Mountain and Standing Rock. He'll just close them down. He'll decide that, well, we're not going to follow those treaties anymore. So be careful of this guy. He holds a grudge. He holds a grudge forever, as strange as that is. So think about this the next time somebody asks you to vote for him. He will. He asked me to vote for him yesterday on the internet. I don't know. I'm going to vote for him. I didn't vote for him the first time. Compulsive gambling, like any other addiction, comes in two forms. Problem gambling, gambling behavior that causes problems in an individual's life, either psychologically, physically, sociologically, or vocationally, and pathological gambling. Gambling behavior that is persistent and continual and significantly disrupts all aspects of an individual's life. And some people do become pathological gamblers. And these people are over there at Fire Mountain. Isn't that the place over by Gallup? Fire Rock. Whatever. They're there, and they're there every day. And they've got really nice cars. They have to gamble. The real difference between problem and pathological gamblers is often time and money. Problem gamblers can't afford to spend as much time and don't have the money to gamble as they want. They average losses of about $3,000 per year. So the next time you look at your finances, I want you to just subtract $3,000. Then you would be a problem gambler. That's what problem gamblers are like. I know. They can't lose the money either. Their finances are not, they don't have $3,000 extra just to throw down the toilet. Pathological gamblers spend far more time gambling and average losses of $11,000 a year. So if you can find $11,000 in your budget someplace, just exit out. The average debt for women entering Gamblers Anonymous is $60,000. How would you like to owe somebody $60,000? Well, it's worse. The average debt for men is $100,000. And these people really have a lot of problems. Studies show that problem and pathological gamblers lose 10 to 20 times as much as non-problem gamblers. So if I went to Fire Rock to gamble, they don't care about me. I'm the last person that they should care about. I'll probably spend $20 and then I'll leave because I didn't win. Or if I win, I'll just take all my winnings and go home. They don't want that. They don't want me to go home. They want me to stay there and gamble. They want it to become entertainment for me so that I don't mind losing $120 or $150. But I'm not the one that they care about because I don't mean anything to them. I mean very, very little because I don't lose enough money. In the study in Connecticut, 47% of the casino patrons were problem or pathological gamblers. In Connecticut, what do you have in Connecticut? Has anybody ever been there? Do you understand who these people are? What's going on? There used to be an Indian tribe there called the Pequot. And the Pequot, a bunch of people who claimed to be Pequot came together and they built a casino. And it's one of the largest casinos in the United States. It's called Foxwood. It's huge. Now the funny thing, or this isn't that funny, I'm sorry. I'm saying it's humorous, it's not really humorous. The Pequot, of course, disappeared in the 18th century. So they don't have any culture. Their culture has been dissolved for two or 300 years. So what they do is they invite other tribes to come in, and they've adopted teepees, like they had teepees in Connecticut. The dances, they'll have powwows there. They'll bring in drummers from Washington and Montana and Oregon and Oklahoma. So they have no culture. So they're trying to borrow culture. They have a huge museum, and they're trying to reconstruct something that disappeared 200 or 300 years ago. It's really kind of tragic. Anyway, these are the Pequots, the Pequot tribe. Half of them are African American, which is kind of interesting all in itself. Anyway, 47% of the patrons are problem or pathological gamblers, and the reason they have such a high number is because they're really close to New York City. So all the problem gamblers from New York can come in, all the people from Boston can come over, and so they get all these problem gamblers from all these urban areas. It's a huge urban sprawl there. They comprise 5% of the population. Gamblers, even though they're, wait a minute. In a study, 47% of the casino patrons were problem or pathological gamblers, even though they only comprise 5% of the population. Okay, so they're bringing these people in. They're like a magnet bringing in the problem gamblers. In Minnesota in 1993, it was discovered that 2% of the population generated 63% of the state gambling revenues. Now, if we're talking about Minnesota, what are we talking about? Where are the casinos in Minnesota? Minnesota? What? Who has casinos in Minnesota? Not Donald Trump. It's the Sioux. It's the Sioux. There's a tribe of Sioux, and every member of the tribe is a millionaire. They have a casino right outside of Minneapolis. They're Dakota. Not Lakota. Not Dakota. They're Dakota. Okay. Every member of the tribe. So if I were you, I would look in my ancestry, see if I could find some Dakota blood in there someplace. Okay, just a thought. Maybe you can make a couple bucks. You never know. Harvard Medical School studies estimated that 125 million people in the United States gamble. 2,200,000 of these individuals are pathological gamblers. 5,300,000 of these individuals are problem gamblers. These are all DRD 2A1 people, potentially. They're that type of people. 125 million, that's a third of the population of the United States. 200 million, that's a lot. 200 million people who are pathological gamblers, and 5 million are problem gamblers. This didn't take into account the 1,100,000 adolescent pathological gamblers. So we have teenagers, we have high school kids, we have college kids who are pathological gamblers. But we don't even count those guys yet. They have to be over 21 before we can start counting them. Male compulsive gamblers outnumber female compulsive gamblers by 2 to 3 times. As stupid as that sounds. Why are men so dumb? Does anybody have an answer? Nobody? Write that down. We need to answer that question. Why are men so stupid? This may be changing with the increase of casinos and slot machines, as women are more likely to use gambling to escape depression, trauma, or relationship problems. So this is another way to escape. You can get drunk, you can shoot up with heroin, or you can go out and gamble. Which is more socially acceptable? Gambling, if you've got the money. Pathological gamblers tend to have the other addictions. 25 to 63% of pathological gamblers have other behavioral or substance addictions. One study found that 73% of pathological gamblers had alcohol problems. 73%. I know. When they go to the casinos, let's give them free booze. Does that sound like a good idea? 73% of them are drunks anyway. Isn't this perfect? Then they'll lose even more money. What are we there for? Money, greed. That's why casinos open. The same study found 38% of pathological gamblers had drug problems, 60% of them smoked, 50% of them had mood disorders, 41% of them had anxiety disorders, 60% of them had personality disorders. Personality disorders of pathological gamblers. Wait a minute, didn't we just have a guy that shot, what? How many people did he shoot? He wounded 700 in Las Vegas? What do we know about this guy? We know that he was a professional gambler, don't we? He had a home in another city. What else do we know about him? We know that he didn't have a whole lot of friends. That he wandered around in flip-flops and sweatpants. Sounds like an attractive fella, doesn't it? We know that he accumulated all these guns and ammunition, and then he just started blasting away on people he couldn't even see. Do you think maybe he had a personality problem? Yeah, big time, exactly. Wow. Oh, man. The group that has seen the greatest rise of gambling is among older adults. I know, I'm old, so I should start gambling just for a good time. Besides, she looks hot to me, doesn't she look hot? Hey, honey. I'm sorry, I'm just teasing. One survey of residential and assisted care facilities found that 16% went to the casinos at least once a month. This is a great thing about casinos. They will give these old farts at in these nursing homes. They'll give them like $10, and they'll go and they'll blow it at the casino. And sometimes they'll win. And when they win, they just keep pumping money back in. So they'll lose the $10. What are you going to do for the rest of the 3 hours that you're sitting there before the bus comes and picks you up? Well, you start putting your own money in there. You know, your Social Security check and whatnot. So they're making money off the old people. Not just the old people. These are the old and infirm. Jeez. They have no ethics whatsoever. This behavior is exacerbated by casino-sponsored trips. Day trips that are found in 2/3 of the facilities. As horrible as that sounds. College students gamble at a higher percentage than any other group. 40% of them gamble, 26% of them gamble weekly or frequently. Heavy college gamblers were more likely to be smokers, heavy drinkers, and or heavy marijuana users. These individuals average lower grades and more frequent abuse absences than other individuals, and it's time to stop. We need to stop right here. I'll stop telling you sad stories.